welcome to another episode of The Growth Compass. Shout out to our sponsor, Senders. If you'd like to do cold email outreach deliverability correctly, you can hit that link in the description. But without them, it wouldn't be possible to discuss really awesome, cool, interesting things with people like Kelly. Welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm very excited to chat with you today.
Oh, this is so cool. The first thing that I noticed when Kelly jumped on the call was her awesome earrings. So I do want to recognize you for that because I don't have mine in right now, but I do recognize cool jewelry. I think that's a really awesome thing to shout out. So before we get into all the cool things that you're building, if you could give just a brief introduction of yourself and what you got going on.
Absolutely. So my name is Kelly Marie Jones. I'm the Vice President of Sales for Point Broadcasting out here in California. Locally owned, independently owned group of radio stations that offer digital advertising solutions as well, which is pretty rare in today's media landscape to work for such a small and nimble company. I just had my dissertation published, so I officially got my doctorate degrry, which I joke I did in my spare time. Thank you. I serve on a few nonprofit boards. One's for a local theater group here. I'm also on the board of a local LGBTQ nonprofit for 8 years. So I have a very full life. I grew up in Scotland, but I've been here in the States for 20 years. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Where in Scotland?
A little town called Stonehaven, just outside of Aberdeen. So on the northeast coast.
Awesome. Well, as you can probably guess, the only place I've ever been is Edinburgh.
Yeah. Most people say that, occasionally you'll find somebody that is that's ventured outside of Edinburgh. It was actually funny. One of my friends who lives in San Diego was in Scotland at the same time I was a couple of months ago, and she missed me in my hometown by one day. So,
no, that's tragic.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Kind of funny. Yeah.
Well, yeah. So like you said, there's a lot of really interesting, cool things that you have to speak on. This mainly what we discuss on the podcast are, growth tactics, growing businesses, taking ideas and bringing them into the world. So I think, in a very traditional sense, there's some interesting experience that you have doing sales. And I think in a less traditional way, the boards that you serve on, and even, you have an idea or many ideas that were discussed, I guess, in your dissertation. That's another example of bringing something into the world. So, anything, I guess, today that you're specifically interested in, we could definitely get into. But I do at least want to start with, because, what a space to be in the radio industry. So
yeah.
How long have you been in that space? Did you transition industries, or how did you end up there?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, I've been here in the States for, I guess it's 23 years now, almost 24 in June. And I had family here, so we'd come over here every year growing up. And when I decided I wanted to stay for a little bit longer, because I came on vacation, but I was like, I guess I'll stay. Well, I guess I'll get a job. I ended up finding a job as a receptionist at a local weekly newspaper. If you live in a big city, it's like the LA Weekly, the Village Voice, an alternative weekly. And I was in that role for about 9 months. And then the publisher moved me into sales. At first, I didn't want to do it. I was like, oh, no, that sounds awful. And he goes, you'll make more money. And I was like, oh, okay. So that was 22 years ago. I've spent my whole career in media sales since then. I worked for that company and in print media for 12 years. And then I worked with another radio broadcaster for 10 years. And then this opportunity arose last January. So I've been here at Point for a little over a year. And one of my favorite, there's a couple of things I love about it, is one is working with, because it's predominantly been local businesses that I've worked with. I've done some regional stuff, some agency stuff, but for the most part, it's been locally owned businesses. So working with them as they're growing, as they're trying to get new customers, as they're developing, and it really is an idea business. It's going to them with an idea that's going to set them apart from their competitors, that's going to help them target new customers in a creative way. It's one of my favorite things about doing this. And then, now in more of a leadership role, having the ability to help my team grow. provide them with tools and coaching and facilitating their growth, which in turn leads to the growth of the company, and everybody's happy and more successful. So it's definitely, and I think to kind of segue into my education, I pretty much haven't stopped going to school for the last 12 years. And because it's always been like, how can I improve? How can I kind of arm my toolbox with more tools and more resources and things like that. So that's been kind of like my big umbrella in like kind of my motivation and kind of what's kept me going, is like, how can I help others kind of be more successful and succeed and help them find solutions? Because ultimately that's what we do in advertising is we talk to businesses about, what's your pain point, where do you need to go, and what solutions do I have that's going to help you overcome that and improve.
Wow, what was your degree in?
So my doctorate is a doctor of education and organizational development and leadership. So yeah, so my dissertation is actually on the impact of breathwork and mindfulness in leaders. So it's
Wow.
So I need to do a better job sometimes of practicing, my findings and things that I found. But a lot of the interviews I did with people were, it really reflected that, the more people had a practice where they were able to be more mindful in the workplace, they found that they had better relationships with their teams. They saw that, that influence that they had over their teams was more impactful and positive as well. And they were able to make better decisions. And so that was, that was really something that was very enlightening to do. And yeah, it was a project for sure, but yeah, it's out there.
Yeah, well, I mean, something we definitely need to come back to before the end of the call, because I think stuff like that is super important. What the next thing from your perspective in the space is, how would you describe the radio space now, or and how it's developed? How does someone like me, who's not as involved in it, how do I understand it?
I think so. It's definitely over for the last couple of decades. The radio industry has kind of definitely been constantly evolving. I think, and it's funny because people, when satellite radio first came out, people were like, "Well, that's going to be the death of radio." But I think what actually happened is people realize, your average consumer, because 97% of the population listen to radio at some point during the week, whether it's that they're at a doctor's office, whether it's in their car, whether it's, getting ready in the morning with it on in their kitchen, they are still consuming traditional terrestrial radio. And I think one of the things that people found is that they missed because everybody tried satellite and they missed, and people still have a need and a want for that local connection. So that's one of the things I'm really proud of about our stations and radio in general, is that, our talent, they're in the community. One of our DJs, he just volunteered on his own time at a Cinco de Mayo festival this weekend with downtown Ventura. There was 15,000 people showed up, and he's recognizable and people know him. We've been impacted here in Ventura County recently in the last few years with things like the Thomas Fire. Radio was able to have that immediate response, let people know what's happening, act as a conduit for public information officers from the county and the fire department and the police department, and getting information to people quickly. It's one of the few sources of media where the community is actively engaged. We have a morning show where we have the mayor on one day, and we'll have the local football team coach on the next day. And, and it's definitely reflecting, this is what's happening in our area. This is what's happening in our community, which you don't really get from other media anymore. And especially in an area like us, where our television stations are based out of Los Angeles. Well, Los Angeles is the second biggest media market in the country. So it's like, that's not giving you local. So I think we're in a very unique position. As I mentioned, the company that I work for, we are locally owned. And so we stand out from major national companies like Cumulus and iHeart. iHeart just laid off 216 people last week, I think, across the country. Yeah. So because they're public, they publicly traded, the answer to stockholders. And so they are often in positions where they're making these cuts, and you're losing that local element. A lot of their shows are syndicated across the country. So that's something that is evolving, and I think we're doing our best to maintain that, because as I said, it's really the one thing about radio that stands out from other media, particularly here.
Where are people consuming radio now?
So, I mean, traditionally, you have your radios in your car, things like that. But we also have apps for our stations, so people can download an app and listen online. They can listen on our websites, and also with smart speakers now, you can say, Alexa, tune my radio into Q95.9, and people are consuming it that way too. So it's definitely diversified a lot, but the majority of the listening audience is still on traditional radios.
What are so two sides of the question. The first one is from your experience working with the radio stations themselves and helping them with their journeys and their growth. And the second is from your perspective as a company as well, growing. How does if typical radio station is even like a useful term, but how does a typical radio station grow? I would imagine the important metric is listeners. And so is there anything in particular about that business model? Do they make most of their revenue on ads? Is it events? Is it something else?
Yeah, so it's definitely advertising is where the revenue comes from. Obviously, it's this chicken and the egg a little bit, because, for advertisers to want to advertise on the station, you need listeners. And for listeners to want to listen to the station, the programming needs to be good. And for the programming to be good, we need the revenue to pay, which comes from the advertising. So it's like the circle of life, if you will, and it all feeds into each other. And I think that's the one thing that is great about our organization, is that, me and the sales side, I work very well with Brian on our programming side, and we bounce ideas off each other, and we come up with concepts, and we come up with packages, and we come up with things that are appealing to advertisers. One of the things we did is we just flipped one of our stations into a sports format. And so because since they were eliminated, we were airing Lakers games, and we're going to be airing the Rams. And so it's kind of like we're giving our advertisers an opportunity to be sponsors of these broadcasts. So they're able to associate themselves with these, huge franchises, but on a local level. So that's been really exciting to do that and see, come up with new ideas and things that are different.
So then from that description, it sounds like your business model as a company is more like a consultancy, like a radio station consultancy.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that I really kind of advocate with my sales team, is when you're talking to a business owner or you're talking to a client, really kind of dig in there, ask those questions. Who is your target audience? Who is, what do you guys stand out for? What are you known for? What sets you apart from your competition? And using that information to not only come up with a, what's the right station, because we have 26 stations and all of them are different formats. So it's like one is going to be a better fit for you as a business owner than another. I think another thing is, putting together a proposal and a schedule that fits your budget and makes sense. Like I always tell, somebody will come to me and they'll be like, well, I have this restaurant and I want to sell them rotators. And I'm like, but nobody is thinking about what they're having for dinner at 6 a.m. So it's like, be smarter about like, where are we placing the ads? What are we, what's our strategy behind the schedule that we're putting together for them? And then using the information about their business to create compelling copy, so the commercial is enticing to the listener and makes them want to go. Because, and I always tell people, it's like, all we can do is get people to, go to your website or pick up the phone or walk into your business. We're not going to be the ones that can keep them there. You need to make sure that you're set up as a business that when you do get that new customer, that you're able to give them an experience that's going to make them want to come back. Or that you're able to handle, if I'm bringing you X number of leads a month, that you're able to handle that you have the infrastructure around that.
But you guys don't help with that side.
We don't. No, we don't. We'd be a little bit all over the place. But I mean, one thing I was saying is working with, working with the number of people as long as I have, I've always been able to, I'm at the point now where I can kind of refer people to people. So it's like, if somebody's like, well, I'm really short staffed and I need to hire folks. I'm like, I have this great relationship with this HR firm who can come in and help you hire, or, well, I want to do this, but I need to build out an expansion. Okay, I have this great AC company, that can refer to you. So it's like, having been in the community for as long as I have and as many relationships as I have, I'm able to kind of make connections that maybe didn't exist before, which is really fun. My friends are like, everybody. And I was like, well, it's just because of what I do. And, and really working in sales, you have to put yourself out there. So, yeah.
Are you guys specific to the Ventura area as far as the radio
So
stations you service?
we have 4 markets that we focus on. One is Ventura County, one is Santa Barbara County, one is Riverside, and one is Lancaster Palmdale. Those are our 4. But however, having said that, because we offer digital advertising as well, we can serve any business in the country. So, if we can help somebody get traffic to their website, we can help somebody with their e-commerce products. So as far as digital advertising, we can help in that regard. Radio stations, we're in 4 markets.
Okay, so then you guys service radio stations and other types of businesses?
Yeah, so we do digital marketing too. So we offer
Okay.
radio and digital solutions for businesses.
Gotcha. Okay, understood. So then from your perspective as VP of sales, what are your guys' strategies for acquiring new business, starting new conversations, getting traffic into your guys' business?
Yeah, so for me, and my team, I think, get annoyed at me about it, because for me, this all sales is a numbers game. It's like, you have your goal, you have your budget, you have your target number that you're trying to get to. And then you just kind of have to work backwards. So it's like, okay, knowing what my closing ratio is, how many appointments, how many presentations do I need to make? Okay, that's that. And then knowing what my closing ratio is, how many prospecting meetings do I need to have? Customer needs analysis, CNAs, first calls. Okay, then there's that number. Okay, knowing that how many cold calls do I need to make? Because ultimately that's where it starts. The activity that you're doing today, it used to be like, I used to say, the activity you do today is going to reflect in your billing in 6 weeks. Now the buying cycle is a little longer. So I'm like, it's probably more like 12 weeks. So I know if I'm making 50 cold calls a week today, in 12 weeks, I'm going to be seeing that reflected in my revenue. But if I'm only making 5 a week, I'm going to be struggling. And I think that's one of the things with sales that people trip up on, is that they get so busy with busy work that they don't focus on what is the actual sales process and what am I doing to move that along? Is it doing a spec spot for a prospect? Is it providing some industry information to a client? Is it asking for a meeting to talk about adding another station, and really kind of like not being afraid to ask? Because I think a lot of people get stuck on that. They're just like, I never actually ask for the business. Worst thing happens is you say no, and somebody says no. So yeah, it's definitely, for me, as far as like growing this company, it's getting more activity out of the sales team.
And an activity for you guys with the types of companies that you guys are targeting and your industry, it is cold calling, cold emailing that is working?
There's that. I also think networking is huge, especially because we are so community based. It's getting out and meeting people, exchanging business cards, going out for a coffee with someone, and really kind of, this is just a people business, and it's just like learning about them. And like I said, finding that pain point and that thing that they need a solution for. Because I can guarantee you that I have something that's going to help somebody grow their business. I have a product, I have a solution that's going to help them grow. It's just finding out what that right one is. So that's really the job, in my opinion.
Okay, got it. So then I guess it from your perspective, as far as what works for you guys, it's less of specifically what the outreach tactic is. It's just mostly about whatever generates a conversation for you guys.
Exactly.
That's what is working.
Yeah. Some people
Nice.
it's going to be walking in their door, walking in their business. Other people, I have some clients, all they want to do is text, especially nowadays, it's like, so there's that. So it's really like dialing in, okay, what is this? How does this person communicate? What is their preferred method? And kind of finding that. It's like I said, it's just, it's dialing it in, it's digging down, it's learning about people and using that knowledge to your advantage.
So using the same topic, the same idea. I want to discuss not just the work that you've been doing professionally, but also with the board of the nonprofit that you've been on. So something that's been really cool for me is I've had some really awesome nonprofit leaders on the podcast and speaking to them about the idea of growth and how to go about it and stuff like that. With as deep an expertise as you have in growing businesses and sales and things like that, how do you, why, I mean, the first question would be, do you? And then the second question would be, if so, if yes, how do you bring that expertise to, growing or contributing to the growth of the nonprofits that you are involved in?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I I think if I don't bring my experience and my knowledge, I'm doing it a service. And the thing that I think helps with the nonprofits that I've worked with, and there's been a few, is I kind of have had so much experience working that idea muscle that sometimes I'll have this moment of aha, what about we try this? People get so stuck in ways of doing things on boards and in organizations that sometimes it takes like a fresh perspective to kind of break something open and offer a new idea and a new solution and a new way of going about things. Especially, when I was on the board of Diversity Collective, that was 8 years, and part of that was over COVID. And as one of the things that we did in my tenure on the board is we went from a 3-person volunteer cubicle in a nonprofit incubator to having a 4,200 square foot community resource center.
Wow.
And 4 full-time staff and a board of 8. And so, it was kind of a lot of the resources that we offered were things like peer support groups and, where people would physically come to the center and come to the space and have resources available to them. And of course, during COVID, we weren't able to do that. So it's like, okay, how do we pivot this thing? So we started doing like basically drive by PPE, drive by safe sex kits, so people could come by the center and get it, but they wouldn't have to, we were kind of like, okay, how do we do this without, with maintaining all the social distancing and things like that we had to do. We moved our peer support groups online, and some of them still meet online and some of them meet hybrid. So there's people in our main room in the center, but then there's also like a Zoom link. So people that can't make it, so that's kind of diversified that a little bit. Looking into, okay, what are different ways to fundraise, doing a virtual auction rather than a fundraising event. And really kind of like, looking at different ways to get people engaged, I think was extremely important during that time. And especially like with a theater group I work with, a lot of, when the theaters closed for the 2 years during COVID, it's like, okay, a lot of people haven't renewed their subscriptions. So it's like, how do we target new folks? Okay, do we partner with other nonprofits? Do we look at the theme of the production that's on stage and work with them, and, invite them along, that, looking to high schools and getting a younger audience engaged with the theater that we didn't have before. So it's kind of, like I say, it's really kind of like, okay, you can't do things the way you've always done them. So how are we going to do it differently? And how are we going to reach somebody that we maybe haven't focused on before, but has the potential to really help the organization grow, either fiscally or volunteer or otherwise,
Yeah, that's what I was just about to say, was that listening to you, it sounded like how you were speaking about how you were defining growth was both on the volunteer side and the fundraising side. And it seemed like there were different approaches to, well, I guess on both sides, engagement is the primary goal.
exactly. Yeah. And I think that's it. I think you have to, and also recognizing with nonprofits that you guys, yes, it's a nonprofit. And that's why one of the things that I do in my day job here at the radio stations is we partner with nonprofits and we put packages together for them that are affordable, because I recognize that if you're not putting your name out there and people don't know who you are and you're not getting that engagement, you're not going to get the donations. You're not going to get the volunteers. You're not going to get the attendees at your events. And one of the other things too that I think often nonprofits overlook is, if you're applying for grants and the grant awarding body or foundation can't find you, doesn't see you don't have that track record to be able to say, look at the things that we've done. Those are harder to get to. So yeah, I think there's so many layers to it with nonprofits. And I think, that's why it's really important to have a team of people that can have varied strengths. And maybe you've got somebody that's great with volunteers but is terrible with fundraising, but that's okay because you've got this awesome fundraising team on this side. So I think it's just really important to make sure that you're kind of covering all those bases.
So many questions, but I do have three specific ones for you that unfortunately don't go any deeper into the nonprofit one, but so we'll just save that for next time, I guess. But I did want to return to your work with the mindfulness. So if you could just speak on maybe your biggest takeaway or one of the things you feel most passionately about in what you wrote about or what you found.
Yeah. It's funny. I finished writing many months ago and I kind of put it away. I think the thing for me that I really took away from it, well, there was a couple of things. Is one of my kind of recommendations for future research is because what I did is I did interviews with individuals and talked about their individual experience and touched on their leadership qualities, but it was mostly about individual work. And so one of the things that I really would be interested in learning more about is like, how does mindfulness practices impact group dynamics? If you look at it on kind of like a bigger scale, I found that the people that practiced were more aware. They were very much more intentional about decision making, about engagement, about communication.
I think one thing that's important when you say practice mindfulness, what are you referring to?
So typically, for the most part, people had various combinations, and some folks were different extremes of it. But typically, some kind of meditation practice, some kind of people had journaling practice components involved as well, and some kind of like physical activity, like whether it's running or yoga or something like that. But for the most part, people have various degrees and combinations of those things.
It's just
yeah, and one of my favorite anecdotes from one of the interviews was somebody that I interviewed was in the military in a air traffic controller position. And they found that they were much more focused and much more level-headed. And in that position where you're literally having to make decisions that can impact somebody's life, that they were able to do that, but also that they were able to communicate these things to their subordinates in a way that was respectful, that didn't fluster them, that had them on board, and that people were much more and this part is across the board of all the people that I talked to, is that people were much more engaged with them, and that they weren't so insecure in their leadership, that they were much more willing to have a group consensus as far as like, I'm in charge, but it was more like, I'm confident in my leadership skills and where I'm at, that I'm able to encourage my team to not necessarily co-lead with me, but I can take their input and use it for the betterment of everybody. So yeah, there's a lot that I got from it that I was really kind of proud to do. Yeah, my committee was great. Yeah, it was pretty good, and a lot of it was breath work too. A lot of people did breath work. A lot of people, that was a big component of my research too, is talking about how breath work impacted their mindfulness practices. So again, whether that's a meditation, whether that's in doing box breathing, whether that was doing, there's many different pieces of breathing, but yeah, that was a big part of it too. So
are there any that you personally gravitate towards out of anything that you mentioned, not just the breath work?
The big thing for me, there's a couple of things. I worked with her. She was actually on my committee. Her name's Dr. Belisa Vranic. She's a clinical psychologist, and she's worked with the NYPD and the NYFD and the Navy SEALs and a whole bunch of people. But she did a TED Talk, and that was kind of what spurred me on to do this for my research. But one of the things is our bodies get untrained in breathing properly from about the age of 5. So rather than breathe horizontally, we breathe vertically. We breathe like this. Whereas for physiological and nervous system needs, the horizontal breathing is actually way better for us. It keeps us regulated. It keeps us calmer. So I try and remember that. The other thing too is your exhale should always be longer than your inhale, because that's getting rid of the bad stuff. So, I try and be cognizant. Okay, if I'm going to breathe in for 4, I breathe out for 6. Things like that. Yeah, like I said, I've gotten a little rusty on everything. But when I find myself getting a little out there, I can bring myself back by doing those things. So
Gems. Wow, gems. Those are so valuable. That sounds like stuff I'm excited to see if that works for me. So the last question I have for you that I'm excited to see how you answer is, it could be small or it could be big. It could be something that's overall or something that happened this morning. But I am curious, what inspires you?
what inspires me? People, community, seeing other people have success. Also things like watching my nephews turn into awesome men, and wanting to be an influence over that, with them, yeah, just like connection and people are like the big things for me. Yeah. I know that's super vague, but
It's
it's easy.
valid. I mean,
It's why I do what
it's
I do. Yeah.
yeah. It sounds like you're the right job. If
I
people
hope
is what
so. Yeah.
if people is what inspires you, because you're in the middle of a lot of it there. Well, Kelly, this is super awesome. I mean, but there's so much that you're doing that we didn't even get to cover. So I think there's another conversation that we should have, because there's a lot that you said that was really insightful, and I appreciate you
That'd be great.
sharing your
Yeah.
expertise. That was really awesome. So if anyone, if you piqued anyone's interest, if someone wants to read what you wrote or reach out or connect with you, what's the best way to do so?
Gosh, that's a great question. What do you suggest?
Well, it depends where you're most receptive. I mean, it could be email. I don't know if there's a website. I don't know if LinkedIn is
Yeah, I
active
mean,
for you, but
email's
it's
probably good.
like you said,
I know.
your method of communication.
Yeah, I know. Well, I don't want to give up my phone number. So email's
Right.
probably
Okay.
pretty good. I can share my email. It's and I don't know if you can put it in your comments or whatever, but it's
Sure.
kelly.jones@pointbroadcastingllc.com.
Beautiful.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, that sounds awesome. Well, Kelly, thank you so much for your time. I'm
Thank
excited
you. It's been great.
to hear how things happen. Awesome. Well, you have a
Yeah.
great day.
You too. Thanks so much.